In this session, we're going to go over creating questions. We're going to go over the pieces and parts of the question, but also how to assemble that question and make it work for you. So, to start, go to Authoring, Topics. I already have some topics that I've set up here. We're going to work out on my topic A here, and then you can click New. Now, we have about 20 different question types, and if you want to see how to do all the questions, we'll have individual breakout videos for each question that's offered here. We're going to do a few in this training, though. We're going to start with multiple choice and kind of explain the pieces and the parts of how that question works. So if you see, we have some options up here of styling. If we click on what we call the stimulus or the question wording section, that will activate that. So this is our question wording section. These are our choices. And then these are our point values that we've associated with those, the proper choice. So we'll just write a simple question here to show you what you can do. So we're going to say, using the image below, what is the proper year pictured? We can do something like that. That's my stimulus. Now, if we look at this, I've got a couple different options up here. I can add anything from a link to a question, or excuse me, a link to a document perhaps. So if you have a manual that you'd like them to see, we can add an image, which is what we're going to do momentarily. You can even add a video, and I recommend the MP4 format, and that you keep your videos down to about a maximum of 2 to 3 minutes. Those seem to work the best. You can also put an audio bite, so maybe an MP3 file in here. And we've seen people do that where they'll record a statement and then have their class go through and dissect that statement with questions. So we no longer use the flash option, which is this one, so do not use that one. You can also embed a video. So if you have like a YouTube video or a Vimeo video, you can actually place that here. And then we have what's called a formula editor and a latex editor. The formula editor works like this. So if you have a problem where you want to put a fraction in, for instance, just simply click that, and it will pop that formula editor up. So we can do something like this. We can say let's say 1/2 plus 2, or 1 equals, and then when you say OK, what it does is it essentially makes that a little image in the question. And if you need to work on that some more, you simply just double click the image, and that'll bring you back to this menu. Now in our case, we're not going to use this. I'm going to go ahead and erase my formula. I just wanted to show you that's there. But in our case, we are going to insert an image. So I have an image of a spur gear that I want to put in here. So we'll go to our image, and we're going to browse for our image. And I have a spur gear. I'm comfortable with that size. So there's my spur gear. Now we have our choices. And you can have up to 32 choices. If you want additional choices, all you need to do is say add new choice. And you can see it's adding them down the page. In my case, I think I'm only going to have 4 choices, so I'm going to remove all these extra ones just by hitting the X to delete the choices. But like I said, you can have a maximum of 32 choices. So let's put my choices on here. So the right answer is spur gear, and I'll show you how to determine or set that in a moment. We'll put a couple other options here. Now we need to select our correct choice. You can call these choices or detractors whatever you want, but when we select our correct choice, which is the spur gear here, you'll see that it automatically puts a point on there. Now, it's important to note that you can also unscore questions. So if you don't want to score, you just want to collect the data off the question, you can simply set this to unscored. It won't score the question, but it will collect the choices that they make. But in our case, we're going to go ahead and leave that scored and make sure we select our correct answer. Shuffling, displaying this vertically is what it looks like currently. If you were to change this to horizontal, it would go left to right, A, B, C, D, when you try out the question or you use the question in an assessment. But right now we're just going to leave it vertical. Shuffling, so every time this question gets delivered, it's going to shuffle the detractors and choices here. So that's what the shuffling is set for. And we're going to leave that like it is. You can also add an all of the above or a none of the above choice option, just so you know. There is a place where you can put a comment box. This is great if you're trying questions out and you want to get some feedback on them. You can literally add a comment in here and they can come in here and fill out additional information. We are not going to use that at this time. That's a little bit more advanced. So once I'm satisfied that I have that, now maybe I want to add some feedback. So I want to say show feedback here. And at the end of the assessment or the end of the block, you can say, provide some choice feedback. How do they do? And so we know that Spurgear is right, so I'm going to say that is correct. And on my wrong choices, I'm going to just do a simple message. Incorrect. The choices, or the answer is Spurgear. So I'll just use that for all my other outcomes here. You guys can maybe point them to a chapter or someplace that's useful, especially in quizzes. So just an idea there. So let me take this and copy this down to my other feedbacks. When I save this question, I want you guys to kind of watch over here on this side. Every question in the question mark system gets assigned a couple things. One, it's saying, hey, this is the question ID, which it makes this question entirely unique. So you could have this question somewhere else in the system, but it's not this question that comes out of this topic, and that's what makes that question ID unique. That's also what helps out in reporting later on when we start running reports and item analysis to make sure we're tracking the right question. And there is a revision ID. We'll discuss that here momentarily. But for now, let's go ahead and exit this question. We're going to save and exit. And you'll see we have a question listed here that we can try out. So I'm going to go ahead and try this question out. And we'll adjust that. But here's our question. You can see my image in there. Let's give the wrong answer first and submit that. And you see it's going to give us a 0 out of 1 points, and it's going to give us the feedback that we set earlier. Now, let's go ahead and give the right choice so you can see what that looks like. So if you hit continue, it'll reset the question. And we're going to check the Spurgear, which we know is our correct answer. And you'll see it's given us a 1 out of 1, and it's also given us the proper feedback for that. So that is how that works. Let's go back a little bit. We're going to do a little bit more work with this question just so you can see how that works. And close this up. All right, so let's say that I've made a change to this question, or I need to make a change to this question. I want you to notice this revision number over here. And this number can change depending on if we do some additional work. So we're going to act like we had a spelling error, or we just want to add some additional text, something like that. So we're going to go into the question, and we're just going to say added some text just to make this a little different. And when I go to save and exit this time, you're going to see I'm going to be brought to a place that now shows a revision number of 2. So that tells me somebody's done some work on this question. If you want to see what's happened with this question, simply put a check next to the question, and then go to More, and go to Revision History. Give it just a moment. And now you can see we have an entire history of what's happened with this question. So we can actually see what the first version of this question looked like by hitting, put a check on the first version. And let's compare that to the second version of the question. What really changed? And you can see here, hey, I added some additional text to this, and that's why it looks a little different. And the nice thing is, if you prefer the version that you had originally, you can simply roll it back. So we're going to take the check off our number 2 here, and we're going to say roll back to that first version. Now it's important to note here, when this happens, it's going to ask for a comment. I'm just going to say that I rolled the question back. And when I save it, you'll see that we have a third version of this question, because technically it's the third iteration of this question. So that's how that looks. So we're going to bounce back to topics again and go into a little bit more of the properties of this question, so the meat and potatoes. So we're going to click on that, and we're going to go to question properties. And it's important to know that this question description comes from the original first 200 characters of the question stimulus. So it'll hold up to 200 characters of that stimulus. If you want to change it at this time, let's say you don't necessarily want the description to match the stimulus that you have, this is a good time to go ahead and change that question description. It's also important to note that if you were to go back through and change that question stimulus, that the question description is not going to change unless you manually go in here and do that. The original reference and review status, these are all options that you can put your own material in there. It's not going to be reported on anywhere but unless you go to this question property screen. But the next one's the biggie. This is the big section. In a normally delivered question, when it says the question status is normal, that means if you say, for instance, I want all questions applied from this topic, and it's in normal status, it says, okay, this question is in normal status, it's safe to deliver to a student or participant. Next, I'm going to come back to the retired, but I'm going to go ahead through with these other ones here. Next, I'm going to discuss incomplete. If it's an incomplete status, let's say that you're actively delivering questions from that topic, but with an incomplete status, the nice thing is it won't deliver that question until it's been set to a normal status. So the incomplete is great if you're working on a question, you're not finished with it, and you don't want to accidentally deliver it to your participants or your students. The next one is called an experimental status. This one allows the question to be delivered in the assessment. However, it won't penalize the student or the test taker if they get the question wrong. So it's great for collecting the analytics, seeing how people are answering the question, but it's not going to penalize the test taker. And then beta just simply marks it. It's just a note or tag in our system that, hey, this question's in beta mode. Just take it with a grain of salt is kind of the way I look at that. And then the big one, retired. Let's say you've delivered this question in the assessment multiple times, and you decide you no longer want to use this question in the assessment. What you do not want to do is come back in and delete that question. You want to come back here and set it for retired. The reason is, if you have any historical reporting that needs to be done on this question, you won't see it if you have deleted the question. But it'll give you the point value, but it's not going to give you any of the question details, so the stimulus or the question choices, that sort of thing. So make sure that you retire it. That way, when it sees it in the system, and it'll see it and go, hey, keep this question in our system, or so it's reportable, but don't deliver to any of our students. That's what the retired command does. So we're going to leave this in the normal status and say OK. And that is pretty much how this question sets up. This is a multiple choice question. I'm going to end here because we've done individual breakout videos of each question type for you guys to look at, and they're about 1 or 2 minutes long, so that will be a great way for you to kind of see how these questions operate and function. So until the next training session, we'll see you soon.